All right, so we have a few more people coming in, but we can get started since it's 12:02. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Layah Hodges. I am an AmeriCorps Vista at the Food Literacy Project, and today I will be co-moderating our panel discussion with Andrew King Bartlett from the Food and Neighborhoods Community Coalition. Today's Learning Lab will be an informative community-based discussion of our current food access system here in Louisville. Next Tuesday, we will have an additional Learning Lab covering land, water, infrastructure, and urban agriculture here in Louisville. Andrew, would you like to share an overview of our current food situation?
I would indeed. Thanks, Layah. Thought it'd be good to just do a introduction just to give folks a general picture of the current moment, which is a special moment. You and I and much of the country are emerging from the pandemic with a great awareness of how precarious and vulnerable our highly centralized systems are, including our food system. The last year and a half have also driven home to any who had doubts the extent to which racism shapes our systems, institutions, policies, and everyday lives. We are in a moment in history where everything seems possible and everything also feels challenging. To emerge out of the pandemic into a healthier and more equitable future that also realizes racial justice, we will need a just recovery. A just recovery does not mean piecing back together the systems that hurt people and the environment. We don't want a recovery that patches up a food system that creates extreme health disparities in our city. A food system that contributes to people in West Louisville dying an average of 10 to 12 years earlier than those in East Louisville. Right now, 1 out of every 5 children in Louisville experiences food insecurity. Hunger, as we know, persists in our rich nation because poverty persists. So we have various federal programs like food stamps, school meals programs to help alleviate hunger, but still there are gaps. Louisville has a food bank, Dare to Care, and a vast system of pantries and meal programs to address food insecurity. But this emergency food system was meant to be short-term. Instead, it has become a permanent feeding system that acts as a Band-Aid, not as a real solution to chronic food insecurity, which is caused by racism, low wages, concentrated and generational poverty, unemployment, and high healthcare and housing costs. So right now, Louisville has a unique opportunity with a huge amount of funding coming to us through the American Rescue Plan to direct those resources into a just recovery. $435 million tax dollars will pour into Louisville over the next 2 years. At the same time, stimulus monies are also helping to fund new and larger US Department of Agriculture grant programs, and foundations are being pressured to shift funding priorities to support transformational changes that center directly affected people and communities. At the same time, Black and Brown-owned farms, food-related businesses, and groups are sprouting up in and around Louisville. A just recovery means building a food system with justice and equity at the center. A just recovery bases its actions on the belief that food, clothing, and shelter are basic and inalienable rights. A just recovery directs resources into a food system which creates good-paying jobs, builds wealth in low-income communities, and is kinder to the environment and climate. So keeping in mind the special opportunities of this moment, today we are looking at food insecurity in Louisville and the ways in which local people and groups are growing initiatives that prioritize equity, health and wellness, dignity, and center people who have the least access to affordable, healthy food. In this short time together, we are only able to highlight a few initiatives. So we did want to acknowledge there are many other players needed to feed a city. To mention just a few, Feed the West got groceries and locally grown produce to families in West End neighborhoods after a downtown Kroger closed its stores last summer in the middle of a pandemic. It continues to provide barrier-free food assistance based on a radical model of resource sharing. The Louisville Community Grocery Food Co-op intends to help address the need for fresh food access in the West End and downtown neighborhoods, where we've lost 5 grocery stores. And this is through a model of cooperative economics that provides good jobs, accessible, healthy food, and collective ownership. And there are many, many more neighborhood groups, congregations, and organizations that are working on food insecurity. But until we build a strong community food web that is more self-reliant, equitable, and secure, we will always be addressing symptoms. We must disrupt and transform the system and build alternatives if we are ever to realize the right to food. Today, we have the opportunity to learn about 3 initiatives that are doing just that and putting equity and the right to food at the forefront. And now I'll pass it back to Layah to lead the conversation with our guests. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for that wonderful introduction and all of that beautiful information. Before we begin our session, there are a few housekeeping items we would like to address with you all. If you have any questions for any of our speakers or us as the moderators, please hold on to them until our 1 o'clock question and answering network session. You can type them in the chat so you will not forget them, and we will return to them during that time, or if we have extra time at the end of our session, we will definitely get back to them then. Additionally, if you would like to keep in contact with any of our speakers, you can include your email in the chat box and we will make sure that they reach out to you. And we would now like to introduce our guest speakers this afternoon. So first we have Karyn Moskowitz. She is a native New Yorker and Jersey girl who landed in the Ohio River Valley region in 1998. Karyn has 18 years of experience as a food justice organizer and social entrepreneur, and she is one of the founders of the New Roots Fresh Stop Markets, which she has operated since 2009 in partnership with hundreds of volunteer leaders. She is a proud mom of a 19-year-old daughter who loves to eat her Kentucky-grown spinach. Next, we have Mike Jackson, who is a Louisville native and urban farmer entrepreneur. He serves on the board of Louisville Community Grocery and will be explaining more later. Rhona Kamar is the founder and owner of Prana Food and Beverage Company. She is a chef of 27 years and is the co-founder of Feed Louisville. Would each of you mind sharing a quick synopsis of what your organization does in Greater Louisville?
Hello, my name is Mike Jackson, owner of Kentucky Greens. We're a small hydroponic farm that's located here in Louisville, in between Russell neighborhood and Shively on Woodland Avenue. We serve all the grocery stores and initiatives that Andrew has mentioned regarding Logan Street Mart Bodega. We have Next Door Market, Black Soil, Black Market, and there's another one I'm leaving out, and I do apologize. And we also work with Travis Cleveland's Family Farm to outsource other fresh grown vegetables to bring them into the neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Karyn Moskowitz. I am one of the founders of New Roots and the Fresh Stop Markets. And what we do is ignite our community's power for fresh food access. We connect thousands of people every growing season to 3 Kentucky vegetable farmers and many orchards so they can access a consistent bi-weekly supply throughout the growing season of fresh, local, organic food. And our movement is run by hundreds of community leaders, including market managers from the neighborhoods where we have our markets, and they pop up every other week in 8 different locations. So we just kicked off the 13th growing season June 1st, and we will be rolling until the end of November.
Hi, I'm Rhona Kamar. I am the co-founder of Feed Louisville. My co-founder is Donnie Green, who is a seasoned street outreach worker. We are a mutual aid street outreach organization. We're partnered with a network of local chefs and restaurants. We take 400 plus hot meals out directly to the streets and to camps every day, along with water and other supplies. We started last March in response to the pandemic. We thought we might be doing this work for a couple of weeks, like all of us who had no idea how long the pandemic would last. And we're over a year now, and with the infrastructure that we've built and the networks that we've built within this community, we see that this work needs to continue despite the pandemic, post-pandemic. So we have a huge network now of restaurants, food companies, bakeries, and I'm also really proud of our farm partnerships and being on this talk today with all of you who are with Mike and Karyn, who are giving so much support to our farming community and our growers.
Thank you all. Now, in most of your introductions, I did find out that most of you are Louisville natives, but what personally motivates you to do this work, and what drives you to stay in Louisville?
I guess I'm going first again. Well, what definitely motivates me, one of the reasons why we started Kentucky Greens, just fed up with going into corner stores and seeing how a lot of things say Food Mart, but there's never really any healthy food. So me coming from a farming family, 2 generations removed, I went ahead and went back into the business with Jackson Dillon, who's also from Louisville. We focused on corner stores, but it was hard getting them into the stores. So that's when we came across Children Shouldn't Hunger, the Black CDC, and they're helping us grow our business to actually focus on corner stores, focus on local grocery stores, and eventually get to a point to where we can put food into schools, apartment complexes, et cetera.
Well, I grew up in Monmouth County, New Jersey, surrounded by a lot of farms and farm stands, and grew up eating local and in season. So my mother was an original kind of locavore, even though she would have never known that term. We just thought it tastes better if we wait for the tomatoes and the zucchini to come out of the local farms. And so I did grow up eating quite a lot of vegetables, but it wasn't until I moved to Southern Indiana and Kentucky that I really started to up my personal game with vegetables and saw a very big transition in my health. And just the way I felt about my surroundings, eating local, and my body and mind and spirit. But when I moved from Southern Indiana into the Portland neighborhood, now 14, 15 years ago, I was really devastated by the lack of concern, just as Michael's talking about, like corner stores saying they had food, not having food, grocery stores far few in between, grocery stores leaving, and also the health disparities. I felt like it was the worst injustice I had ever seen. And on the other hand, on the other side of Louisville, there were I think that year, first year, 26 farmers markets. So really ever since then, I've been working to pursue food justice, making sure that everyone who comes to us and wants access to this fresh, beautiful, local, organic food, a consistent supply, to live happy and healthy lives, that we're going to be there for them. And I just think Kentucky has the most beautiful food, and would love for everybody to have access to it.
I grew up in a small town in Kentucky. My grandparents grandparents, one set of grandparents were farmers, completely self-sustained on the farm. So I grew up in that environment. I grew up eating, food right out of the garden every day. And my grandmother is the person who inspired me to cook. I was in her kitchen from the age of 3, cutting out biscuit dough and all of that. And she inspired me, but I also wanted to live in the city. I was drawn to the city. I couldn't wait to kind of get away from the rural life. So went to the University of Kentucky and then moved to Louisville, where my other grandparents are from. And I consider Louisville to be my hometown now after 30 something years of being here. I think we have a wonderful community, and I love to see the emphasis that our community has put in recent years on supporting local farmers and small producers. I think it's really important. I've been in the restaurant business for 27 years. I'm a chef, and it's somewhere along the way, my former husband and partner in the restaurant decided to farm. And when he first suggested that idea, I said, fine, I support that idea, but don't expect me to be out there too much digging in the dirt. I'm terrified of spiders and I have no desire to be out there. But actually what happened, that experience really reconnected me to my upbringing, and it made me really see the importance of the lifespan of a food. As a chef, to be able to actually choose the variety to grow and then plant that and see it, and harvest it and then decide what to cook with it was very exciting, and really helped to root me into the food system here that we have in Louisville. And then so many years later, this, past year, I was renting a kitchen at Douglas Boulevard Christian Church for my new company, and ran into Donnie Green, who does outreach. And so Feed Louisville, we serve the houseless community, and so that started, this work started as an accident. It started as a conversation that might never have taken place. And there was a need, and we said, okay, let's do this. Let's just cook for people. And so to answer the question of why I do this work, I think that as a cook, and a person in the hospitality industry, feeding people people who cook, we have a sense of urgency every day around feeding, right? We believe that, when somebody around us is hungry, like we can't rest until they're fed. But on a bigger scale, hunger is an emergency situation on a community level, on a global level. Houselessness is, in my mind, it's a humanitarian crisis. So it just makes sense to me every day. And I'm thankful every day that I can use my experiences and my skills and my passion for food and connections to be able to feed really the most vulnerable of all of our neighbors. That is, I think, my big why.
Wow, those are all very incredible stories and paths to this food justice need that we have. So, leading into our next question, what do you think are the top 1 or 2 things that need to be improved about Louisville's food system when it comes to food justice?
The same exact thing we've already been working on: access, the knowledge of how to use the ingredients. Policy is definitely a big one. And then just keep doing what everybody in this room is exactly doing, but with more collaboration. Because Kentucky Greens is focused on the retail, but Rhona is also focusing on the homelessness. So preventing waste, we should be working with Rhona. Ms. Karyn, she's already reached out to us to actually provide more vegetables and a brand to her customers. The policy is going to be the biggest thing, and that's what Finn has been working on for the past 2 years since I've been involved with them. Keep pushing that, getting people that aren't involved with food aware of what we're actually working on. Let them see it so that they can actually say, okay, well, I'm not involved with this, but I'm involved with healthcare. How can they help? Just keep pushing the work forward is the main thing that I'm focused on. But policy is definitely a change. Like I said, with the corner stores, something that says Food Mart that does not serve healthy food should be taken down. Um,
Wow. So, all of us here have been working a lot with Grassroots. So we're on the ground, we're organizing with families. And with Fresh Stop Markets, 75% of our families identify as having limited resources and or are paying for their food with SNAP food stamps. And many of us didn't grow up eating lots of fruits and vegetables, and we've been isolated from this local food movement and isolated from fresh food by economics, by institutional racism and classism and redlining. And now, like Michael said, we have to continue to push and say, this is available to us to eat. But often at New Roots, we feel like we're alone in the trenches. There is not, like, the institutions in Louisville that you would think would be all over this, partnering with us to get this consistent supply of fresh food, everybody are not on board. I'm talking about the medical school, healthcare practitioners, the schools, the local government, the state government, as far as advocating for fresh food as a basic human right, for the connection between fresh food and health. And so, we sometimes, like last year, toward kind of the middle end of the growing season, we had more supply than demand. So we couldn't find enough people to come get the shares, like, because we don't have the marketing budget. We're competing against targeted marketing in the neighborhoods of fast and processed food and the corner stores. So, we can't do this. The Grassroots is great. I mean, and we're making so much progress, but we cannot do this alone. We need leaders at the very top to also scream fresh food as a basic human right. We have this opportunity now, and we've had it through the pandemic, to come to terms with why are people of color dying at faster rates than white people in the community? Why are Kentuckians dying at faster rates from COVID? And the governor went as far as saying, well, when one of the reporters asked him at a press conference early on in the pandemic, well, we're an unhealthy state, which indeed we are. But he didn't go that one step further and say, why are we an unhealthy state? What are our policies? What are our institutions that create this barrier between all of us and fresh food? And so one of our key allies has been the private sector. So we've been partnering with companies who are not yet paying a living wage to their employees, trying to get there, and have a lot of hourly workers. So as a benefit, they buy fresh shares from our Fresh Stop Market in the Portland neighborhood for their janitors. And this is FMS, Facilities Management Services. They purchase 70 shares every other week for their workforce. If we had more companies like that who are acknowledging that the money in our community is housed in the private sector, and they need to share that, they need to share some of that with their employees, with farmers, so that they can have a healthy workforce with low turnover. I mean, it's good for everybody. So yeah, there's a lot, but not to unpack there, I acknowledge. And we'll get back to some of the other solutions.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Mike and Karyn said, it's a lot, right? There's a lot of layers to it. We're talking about food sovereignty. I mean, we're talking about food justice, but food sovereignty is, the ability, having the resources to make choices. I think that in terms of the work that Mike and Karyn are doing, and so many other people in our community, which is to create more choices, the access to choices, right? Access to fresh food. So we have that aspect of it. But food sovereignty is having the resource. Food justice is having the ability to even make those choices. And so what I see at the bottom line of all of this is we have to pay people a living wage. People have to be able to afford food. We're all doing great work to make sure that food is available. From my experience in the past year or so with Feed Louisville, there's no shortage of resources in our community. In fact, my experience every day is that there's a gross abundance of resources. Sometimes I'm drowning in resources. There's a gross abundance of people who need them. There's some gap between them, between those two, between the resources that are available and the people who need them. So a lot of the work that some of us are doing in terms of connecting people with food, like we take food out every day to our houses community, and we can keep doing that work and we will keep doing it, but we don't want to have to keep doing that work. We want people to choose for themselves. You know, one of the most powerful experiences that I've had over this past year is seeing the difference between us handing food to somebody every day. Here, we made the choice for you. We decided what you're eating today. Here it is. We're happy to do that. And then people that sometimes we have a tiny little food pantry in our kitchen that sometimes will, people can come in and kind of look around and take what they want. And there's a huge difference in that experience for them when they get to choose what they want. You know, so to me, sovereignty is about you making the choice, but you have to be able to afford it. So we need to build grocery stores. We need more farmers markets. We need better access to food. But unless people can afford it, that's the bottom line. So those are really systemic problems, you know, and those are policy changes and corporations. We need to put pressure on corporations paying better wages to people, you know. And the way I see it is there's two kinds of people. You know, we have people who can afford resources, and that's no problem. They have access and they can afford it. And then we have people who for whatever reason, whatever experience they're having in their life right now, they cannot procure their own food. They cannot prepare their own food. And that's a lot of the people that we're working with. In terms of the houses community that we're working with, there's only one solution to the problem, and that's housing first. We have to get people into housing, and we have to create a system around them that supports them. And part of that system will be feeding them. So taking people off the streets, getting them into housing, providing the resources they need, which a part of that will be food. Part of it will just be preparing it for them, for those who can't do that for themselves. And part of that will be empowering them to do that for themselves.
Thank you all for mentioning these big issues that we need to address within our city. So regarding the challenges that you have named, what do you envision being the first or essential steps for solving that?
Going back to collaboration, I'm going to stick with that because that's a huge key. Picking the right partners, like, you know, that's why we teamed up with Children Shouldn't Hunger. They know these families. They know exactly who needs the food, and they do it in a non-exposure way. A lot of times when people need food, they're kind of intimidated to come get it because, and Karyn or Rhona, fill in on that, please. They feel intimidated to come get it because there might be somebody sitting around with cameras and stuff like that. And a lot of that times people don't realize that we put these people in positions to lose their jobs for these type of situations. It's crazy, and there's somebody else that can elaborate on that. But that is a true instance. Financial literacy, because even if you can afford the food, you have to make the right choices. But when it comes to making choices, you got to understand what people are exposed to. If you're not exposed to healthy food, that's not going to be a choice for you. McDonald's is going to be a choice because they have a new chicken sandwich. Not trying to be funny, that's really what it is. Also talking to, I know a lot of these barbecue places, they actually want healthy food. They actually want to partner with some of the people that are working to provide healthy food to change some of their menu options, because these are some of the people that can provide provide affordable food to these people. So they want to make sure that they're offering salads, carrot sticks, all stuff like that. And then also funding for the organizations that are in this room. We can't grow our business to help the people when we're coming out of pocket. It's something that we're going to continue to do, but it's something that's needed as well in order for us to get up to what we need. And then also keep pushing policy. If something is wrong, Finn has these meetings where they're asking these questions. If you see something in the neighborhoods, no matter if it's West Louisville, Newburgh, East End, say something. That's the only way something's going to change.
So, after about 15 years of doing this work in Louisville and, trying to overcome the price barrier, which is what Fresh Stop Markets is all about. So no one is turned away for lack of income. And for $6 on a SNAP food stamp card, you can get $40 worth retail value of organic produce, enough to last your family for 2 weeks. But still, people hesitate to get involved. Even though our system is anonymous, nobody knows who pays what. Nobody knows when you come to a market, who's a higher income shareholder, who paid with SNAP, because all that happens ahead of time. So we're still struggling, even though we are having our largest season ever with about 700 shares, we're struggling with lack of resources. If we had more funding, we'd be able to have more people access food. We're also struggling, like I said, with the demand. And so one of the things I've been doing since January, I'm here in Monmouth County, New Jersey, where I grew up, as a member of the New Jersey Food Democracy Collaborative. And I am trying to understand how other states' grassroots folks work together to change policy. And one of the, so I'm on the leadership team of that organization, a statewide food justice organization, but I'm also on a team of people that is all healthcare providers. So the 3 major hospitals that are located either in this county or one north and one south, key leaders in those hospitals are on a team with me and one other organizer studying how to make food, preventive food from local New Jersey farmers, preventative medicine, how to get it paid for by the hospital and put into their community plans, how to get Medicaid to pay for it, how to get veggie prescriptions, which is something we tried New Roots in Louisville and had some success with. So I've been studying and learning and trying to understand, what are the key differences that would motivate hospitals here as opposed to in Louisville to do this work. And 3 states so far have passed Medicaid waivers where you could use dollars, Medicaid dollars, to buy Fresh Stop Market shares equivalent. Can you imagine that? The power of that policy, institutional change. So that's what I'm really excited about learning more about.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the solutions, I think that again, it's very multi-layered. I love the work that that Karyn is doing with New Roots. I think that's been amazing to watch her organization grow over the years, and providing fresh food to people. I've loved the model that she had where they're teaching people. They actually do classes every week at the stop so people can see what there is, because a lot of times the challenge, even if someone has like you said, the ability to you've made it affordable, so they have the ability to purchase the food, take it home, they have a stove, they have a refrigerator. Sometimes these are very basic barriers for people, and these are real barriers that people in our community, you wouldn't believe the number of people in our community who don't even have a stove or gas turned on in their home. So these are very basic barriers to food preparation. But to be able to educate people on how to use the food that's available to them is definitely a challenge. And I think that all of these, there's so many different challenges, but going back to to our work specifically, since I'm speaking about the houseless community, and it's not just the houseless community, there are plenty of people who are housed but food insecure and don't have, as I said, don't even have the ability to prepare food or the knowledge, or they're dealing with so many other challenges, every day. I mean, how many of us who are just busy in our lives every day sometimes can't find the time, the energy to prepare a meal? But in terms of the houseless community, I'll just speak about that. The only solution that that we see at this point after doing this work for this long is that we have to get people indoors. We have to get them housed. You know, you're not going to be, you don't care that much about it's not that you don't care, you don't have time to think about the quality of your food, whether it's a well-rounded, nutritious meal. I mean, I'm proud of the work that we do because we do send out very hearty meals. They have vegetables and, you know, everything's fresh. We rarely open a can for anything. Nothing's frozen. They're hearty meals. They're fresh food every day. But, you know, it's people who are experiencing homelessness. They're not thinking about that. They're thinking about, you know, just surviving every day. You know, so we have to get people indoors. We have to get them housed. And we have to provide them with services around them to deal with their root causes. And in the meantime, we can move them towards food sovereignty in terms of their own ability to choose what they eat and prepare for themselves. So I think that for us, at least in this part of the community, is number one priority.
Thank you for sharing these efforts. This will go into our last question, which will also go into a community discussion. What are ways that the community can really engage with your initiatives and assist in bettering our food system here in Louisville?
Get involved. Get involved with all of the organizations that you see here. We run a small farmers market on Opportunity Corner at 18th and Magazine. You know, we're trying to actually consistently bring more farmers markets to West Louisville, like Karyn has, and it's consistent. You know, we need more education as well, as far as how to get SNAP and stuff like that. You know, with Kentucky Greens, if you see our products, just, you know, purchase them. We're trying to make it a brand that people can recognize when we do put these in the corner stores, so that they see, okay, this is something that's here local. You know, just brand recognition on that end. But get involved with FIN, get involved with Ag in the City, New Roots, Feed Louisville, Louisville and Urban Harvest. There's so many, we can name them all, but get involved. We need more manpower, more different insights, education backgrounds, experience backgrounds. Get involved.
Yeah, same as Michael. I mean, there's plenty of work to do. Like with New Roots, right now we're in the thick of the growing season. We have a little bit of room left for families who are on SNAP benefits or have limited resources at some of our markets. And all of our markets are volunteer driven, so everybody is welcome to come pack shares and show up and meet people and talk about food and spread a healthy, fresh eating culture around. And also, like, we were talking about the barriers. So Rhona was talking about maybe somebody doesn't have a stove, or maybe somebody doesn't have, you know, equipment. Like, let's get it for them. You know, let's figure out what people need. And people will open up, you know, at the markets often, you know, because it's their community and they feel comfortable. So we definitely need that help. We need resources. You could sponsor a family. You could donate for the season to help us have more income coming in so we could buy more food. And we also need very specific help. If there's anybody out there who would like to join us in talking with other families who might be new to eating fresh local food and preparing it, and also just, you know, very busy. I mean, we're all busy, and it's very difficult to make time to cook, but often when you have a support, you have another family who's cooking the very same food and trying to eat local food too. That would be very helpful to us if you are willing to help a family, you know, overcome any barriers to getting this food from farm to belly this season.
I think that's just the nature of this work, right? Nonprofit work is always more funding, more volunteers. So it's the same thing. I definitely invite anybody who is interested in the work we're doing to come and work with us in our kitchen, and you can help to prepare meals every day and see how we, how we put those meals together, the way that we're using the fresh produce that comes in from all of our farm partners. I always ask everybody, please support those who support us. We have 16 local restaurant partners. You can find those on our website. We have farm partners. Just supporting the people who are supporting us, the commitment that people in this community have made to do this work with us has been overwhelming to me. It's so beautiful to see how much people keep doing it every week, every day. So supporting them is really key. Talking to your council people and, on the issue of homelessness, talking to local government officials about how we can move towards getting people housed and stop, sort of putting Band-Aids on this problem, and, really just go to the root problem and get people housed. On a really more sort of personal level with our organization right now, we're raising money to build a walk-in refrigerator in our headquarter kitchen because we cannot keep up with the enormous amount of resources coming in. So we could prepare hundreds of more meals a day if we had more food storage, but we don't have that right now. So that's like a really specific, immediate sort of need. Sometimes we have fresh produce coming in that we're not able to use. I try to share it out across our partnerships, but sometimes we're seeing things that, we're getting things we can't use. So I think it really speaks to the amount of resources that are here that we could really take more advantage of.
Thank you all so much for answering our questions. Now, this is the end of the questions that we have prepared, but we are opening up the floor to anyone who would like to raise their hand in Zoom, and we can call on you to ask a question. If you don't feel comfortable coming on the mic, you can definitely type your questions in the chat, and Andrew and I will help facilitate answering those questions. And again, if you would like to keep in contact with our speakers today, please drop your email in the chat, and we will definitely make sure that they reach out to you after the session. Thank you.
And feel free to put on your camera as well. We'll go to gallery view, so it feels more like a round table conversation. Anyone? And if in the conversation, the panelists had questions of each other, you should feel free to ask questions or comment. So Avram has, I think, the money coming, is that a windfall? I think that's probably referring to the mention of the American Rescue Plan funds that are coming into Louisville. Is that right? That's the amount that's coming into Metro Louisville over the next 2.5 years. And it's a windfall in the sense that it's a significant percentage of the annual budget. I think it's something like a quarter of the budget. So it's a great opportunity, and that's for a lot of different things related to recovery from the pandemic. But it certainly covers things like public health, economic recovery, which includes jobs in the food system. It feels like something that should be devoted to strengthening, making more secure and more equitable the food system as well.
Well, that's the question. It should be. Are you guys have any idea if it's going to directly affect you guys? If you guys are going to be able to participate in some of this to a significant level?
We are making the case for exactly that. Yeah, we've been holding roundtables with community folks, stakeholders throughout the food and ag world, and determining, what are the needs, what are the gaps, what are the needs for funding, and putting that together into a proposal that will be submitted and advocated for. In fact, this learning lab is part of a series that we're doing to kind of build the case for the importance of investing in a strong local and regional food economy.
What's the timeline for this?
Phase one monies are already kind of accounted for. I think that was roughly $39 million of the total, but there will be a phase two and phase three. 2024 is when the money has to go out the door from Metro Council to decide on where that gets allocated.
Okay.
And then that money, those monies have to be used by 2026.
It's a Metro Council decision.
That's my understanding, that ultimately Metro Council makes all those decisions, yes.
How does Dare to Care, Kentucky Harvest, how do these other organizations interface with you? How do you connect all the dots?
It's a great question.
It's a good question. There's really not an overlap, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah, and that's one of the roles that Food Neighborhoods Community Coalition is trying to fill, but it's a volunteer organization. And so we're in the process of the beginnings of figuring out what kind of community structure can kind of connect the dots, make the connections, determine priorities. So that needs to be a broad stakeholder, community-driven process that, understands the needs and directs the funds to where they're needed the most, with the foremost priority put on equity and making sure that the unequal distribution of funds is addressed in the process as well. Do others have folks they would like to add to that? Other folks have things they would add?
Andrew, could you put the name of that coalition in the chat? That seems like a good way to try and put energy into that, and hopefully twist some arms with Metro Council too.
Yeah, it should be in the chat. The Food and Neighborhoods Community Coalition. We can put the website in as well. It's just foodandneighborhoods.org. But yeah, there's different working groups that kind of work on those different areas of the food system, and folks can plug into those action teams and further those conversations. Cindy?
Andrew, you might talk a little bit about how do other communities communicate and cooperate in the food system? I mean, we've been talking about, and Louisville had a food policy council several years ago. I don't know that things were better then because it didn't last really long enough. But, breaking down the community barriers, for instance, and I'm just assuming there might be a barrier between Dare to Care and Feed the West or the community change, all these new groups that came up. I don't know all the people who are on this call, but we really need to speak with all those food groups to get them to cooperate. And for right now, the ARP funding is a possibility for creating a really community-based food policy council, not a government-based one. So we really need to be speaking with all our friends and family and the groups we volunteer for to make a case for something like that. I mean, maybe there's another system, but that seems to be the obvious need, is for the cooperation and collaboration.
Yeah, great points. And and some of that, comes back to resources. That's definitely the role that Finn is trying to play, but with an all volunteer leadership, it's hard to build much momentum around that. So, we're looking for foundation funding just to help with that coordination process of pulling together that food policy or that food community food action council that can make those connections and kind of broadly represent the full needs, the comprehensive needs in the community.
Andrew, I could speak about that a little bit in terms of my experience just with those bigger organizations. I applaud the work that they do. I think there's value in it. But I think one of the things that hopefully all of us learned with the pandemic is how crucial it is for us to decentralize our food system and to bring it back to smaller community efforts. Each small community should have the infrastructure for producing the food that's needed within that community. So we saw that when we really started getting into this work and building it, and we needed access to resources and weren't initially able to do that because those were not made available to us because we were a new grassroots organization. And it took us time to prove ourselves and to go back and ask to be, to have access to those resources. So I see a lot of, I'm fortunate and I feel grateful that we are able to do that, to have, to be partners with those bigger food banks who provide us with a lot, but we make an effort to not be completely dependent on them. And I think there's a lot of really great grassroots organizations, small feeding organizations in our community, trying to do work and struggling to get access to the same resources. So we try to act sort of as a hub and bring in whatever we can bring in, and we share that out amongst smaller organizations who may not have those connections. So I definitely applaud the work you're doing in trying to protect smaller organizations and empower them.
And the folks that were invited to this, to be on the panel, are in a way recreating the system that should be supported but is not. New Roots with the Fresh Stop markets, they're basically creating a parallel food system, a whole food chain from farm to eater, and centering the people who most need access to that healthy, fresh food. Mike's vision about community stores that are carrying fresh, healthy food that are walkable from every neighborhood is creating that kind of decentralized system that we need, and is ultimately so much more resilient and secure for those that need to eat every single day. I don't know if you want to talk about that initiative, Mike, at all, but I think it's a really exciting vision.
Yeah, I mean, when I first, brought it up to Amanda Fuller, it wasn't for Mike Jackson or Kentucky Greens to own. I was looking for anybody to take this idea and run with it, because you look at some of the areas that need the food, and even if they do have a corner store, it's still not even 2 blocks mile radius away from them. There's still a lot of barriers that we have to break. And that's why I'm always going to speak on partnerships, funding. With the corner store initiative, it's a basic needs store. We're not trying to sell you a whole bunch of other stuff. It's your basic needs, from hygiene products to food. That is the main vision and goal for the corner store initiative.
Thanks, Mike. Other questions? Can't see people's hands necessarily. Yeah, just jump in if you want to add a comment, a connection, a resource you want to connect folks to. Yeah, anything.
Yeah, Joppa Buckner. So, in listening to the speakers, thank you all for this work you're doing, and recognizing all of you in some way have talked about how one of the issues is that you, in a way, communities have to learn how to be self-providers. you know, we have been very provided by the business owners and whatnot in a way that has been very unhealthy for us. And so, and even though we now have all these grassroots organizations, they still aren't being accessed well. And in the 60s, when we used to have the war on poverty stuff, my mother was a community organizer paid by the government, and we actually had co-ops. I grew up in Parkway Place projects. My mother organized a co-op to buy food. I think at the time it was called the Ojai River Valley Federation of Producers. And so we provided for Parkway Place food, fresh food for ourselves. And I think in terms of what you all were doing, I don't know how it's organized in the West Indiana in terms of community area councils and whatnot. But those it's like community-based groups have to be the way that all of these resources that are coming there are accessed, and way becoming self-providers. Because otherwise you just have the problems that you have talked about, you know, whether or not you can get the people in government and above to address policy, whether or not you can get the people who don't have access to be aware of what you all are doing and how to get in touch with you. Somehow there has to be these mechanisms again that were there briefly and were actually effective, but became politically, the whole war on poverty thing shifted, and now those are community organizing things. Like in Louisville, like every area council had a community organizer who could go and say, that if we still had that, could go to Mike, could go to, you know, Karyn and say, hey, how can I utilize what you're bringing to get more healthy food for the people I work with, you know, and therefore being a self-provider. And I'm not really sure if there's any such entities like that existing anymore in the different areas in Louisville. But somehow I think those have to be inspired, resourced, you know, motivated to be able to truly build a different food chain system from the ground up.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think that's why Mike and so many of us are supporting, you know, the work of the Louisville Community Grocery and LACE, which is the Louisville Association for Community Economics. Because yeah, the resourcing it's not coming to us as a gift. It has to be, you know, generated by ourselves, and the community economics approach is critical for that, right? It always has been for marginalized communities, and it still is true today. So yeah, collective ownership, community economics. Mike, I know you're on the Louisville Community Grocery Board. I don't know if
I've been off the board. I'm still involved, but I'm not on the board.
Okay.
I'm mainly focused on the work I'm currently doing. But I can, you know, with the Louisville Grocery Co-op, that's why they're looking for owners. You know, and I wish somebody that was currently involved right now was here, but we need owners for that grocery store to even be built, to even find a location. And one thing, Japa, I hope I'm saying that right, a lot of organizers need to get out of self. That's one thing that, you know, we talk about in closed circle meetings. We need to get away from self. Like, we got to stop being afraid to speak with each other. I think Chantrice has tried that approach, but once again, you have people that want to help others, but they're so tunnel vision on their one project. And I see Cindy doing dance moves. I don't know what that's about. But yeah, I mean, you know, I'm not a very outspoken type person. I've always been the go do it type person. And eventually I feel like that's going to happen. Eventually we're going to come to a head and actually have this real deal conversation very bluntly. What is it that I can do to help you? And what is it that you can do to help me? And just do it. You know, so Karyn, Rhona, fill in.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. And I love the fact that you've said collaboration maybe 5 times in this past hour. It's one of my favorite words. And I think it's critical for us to move forward as a community. We have a lot of people doing a lot of great things, and each organization is doing something a little bit unique. But even when there's a lot of overlap, we need each other. You know, that's this whole concept of mutual aid is something new to me in this past year, moving away from being a business owner to a nonprofit world. And I love it because it's that is community, right? And we're all doing this work together. We just have to figure out how we can, you know, support other people and what they're doing and kind of get our own ego out of it. So I love that idea.
I know Judd Hendricks is running the Zoom itself, but I always look to him for interesting questions. You got anything on your mind, Judd?
Yeah, I guess what I'm interested in, those of you that have been participating, what's been said or what's emerged in you while you've been listening to this conversation? Like, has there been an idea, or did you make a connection somewhere, or what really lit you up, or what did you get? Did you have emotion at some point? Like, kind of harvesting what's emerging in our conversation. That's a good way to do that. So anybody, you can unmute yourself and just share what's showing up for you. I think that's where the collective speaks, where you have energy or insight. Or so anybody jump in, and yeah, Aldous.
Well, I've joined this and was interested in this because I don't know a lot about the topic. I've touched base with a few organizations that have gotten involved, but trying to figure out how best I might fit in. I'm not working at the time for the time being, and I still have a lot of questions. It's answered some questions. I think I'm learning a little more about it, but I have a long way to go to really figure this out.
So if you're on the outside looking in on any of the work that anybody is doing, like, you take your expertise, like whether it's customer service, how do you feel like that could benefit what we're trying to do?
Well, I both financially and just in my time, I have donated money to several organizations, and I've donated my time. I've gone to one where I help not really prepare food, is popping boxes to prepare to put lunches into. And I did that 2 or 3 times, but I can't say I found that extremely fulfilling. I've worked with one of the organizations, and I continue to distribute food to groups. It's a specific group in town, and it's involved with partnering with the aforementioned, the big box food providers. And I have enjoyed that, helping, load groceries up and stack, and I've delivered groceries and done all that, but I'm still, trying to figure out how I best fit into this, and maybe for more time, giving more time.
When I hear that, I feel like you're somebody that's recognizable, on both ends, because you are dealing with big box. So you're somebody that can actually work with Karyn, work with Rhona, work with me, and actually have those conversations on both ends, because you've already been working with the big box and now you're involved with the grassroots. You're going to be able to see the pros and cons of all the work that everybody's doing. I'm sorry, does that make sense, Ms. Hodges?
Yes, and I'm still sort of sorting it out, but I've learned a lot today, and I'm even during this conversation, I became a new Roots shareholder. So you got another one.
Awesome.
I would also like to make a plug for myself and for the next generation. I previously mentioned I'm an AmeriCorps Vista, meaning that I'm a temporary volunteer volunteer at a nonprofit organization based at one place throughout the country. So currently I am serving a year-long term with the Food Literacy Project, where we promote youth to cultivate the land and pretty much teach themselves how to farm. They bring it back to their families. They make sure that you're not fully relying on the commercial food system, because as we've seen throughout the pandemic, a lot of things have fallen short. And I believe that my generation is the next one to really take charge and take initiative. And I would just like to thank you all for coming out today, for speaking about these issues. I definitely would like to continue to stay involved with these organizations. I have not completed my undergraduate degree, so I'm using these kind of conversations to help drive myself to a career path. And I would really like to be involved in agriculture, sustainability, and making sure the community is being taken care of, because you need these people, you need younger people who are actually interested in this and have their heart in it. Because if you're just gonna do it for money, you're never gonna really be satisfied. And again, I'd like to thank you all for coming out today.
Abby, you had put a comment in the chat box. Would you be willing to unmute yourself and make that comment? Folks on Facebook don't get to see those.
Yeah, it's so wonderful to hear from you all, and I'm happy to know a lot of you, and it's nice to become acquainted virtually with those of you I don't know. Yeah, I just keep coming back to the idea that really the time and labor that goes into coordination, like big picture coordination and facilitation of ongoing conversations among all of these wonderful actors in the food system of Louisville, like that's a huge job, and it's really important. And I think that it's something that needs to be funded, and it need, like people need to be compensated for that labor and time. And right now I think it's happening purely voluntarily, which is wonderful. And they're all, there's all this passionate energy around it. But I think to really create a sustainable system where each piece is aware of the other and knows how they fit into the whole, there's a real need for coordination and facilitation, and that needs to be compensated.
I agree. I was on a webinar yesterday, kind of a small private conversation with the founder of the Massachusetts Food Collaborative, I think is the name. I don't know if you know them, Andrew Winton. And yeah, so exactly. They have money now. He mentioned an angel donor, somebody in the community who has a lot of money to share, decided it was important, like you're saying, to have paid staff to then coordinate the Massachusetts food system. And I think they're 5 years into it. And what they've done is just incredible, because we were all listening with envy. They've become lobbyists, basically, to the Massachusetts state legislature to get all kinds of things done, all kinds of policy changes, money into, like the Kentucky Double Dollars program, which we participate in, is run through Community Farm Alliance, and it's federal money, but that's not going to be there forever. And so the Massachusetts legislature, I think, passed a bill that said, yeah, we're going to put in some money too and help it continue. Why not? It's working. Why wouldn't we? But because we don't have that type of high level coordination, because we're all volunteers, we're just missing a lot of opportunity to hold people accountable. So yes, it's true, the grassroots is super powerful and important in our community and getting a lot done. But there's a lot of resources and help we could be demanding if we were coordinated. And it's our right to demand that. I mean, this money that's coming into the community and very, very small amount being spent on food systems after what we've just been through and what we've been going through, I mean, it just blows my mind. But we need to demand it, because like Andrew said, it's not just kind of coming to us in our lap. It's not going to. It's not a priority for whatever reason. I guess we just have so many. We have so many priorities. This is not one. And it should be top priority. If it's the basis of our good health and happiness, it should be our priority.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on what Abby and Karyn were saying, and kind of go back to what I was speaking about earlier. There was a point at which the federal government decided in this war on poverty thing that they were just going to give money to community organizers. My mother was one of them. I remember as a young person, there seemed to be all of these community organizers who were given a salary and they were trying to solve problems in their communities, you know, and it's great, as Karyn said, to help people who are on a different level doing this, who can demand these types of funding and whatnot. But I still want to say that if people on the in the marginalized communities, like back then, maybe with a different picture of outcomes, because I think the reason that program was squashed is because it was having different outcomes than the powers that be wanted. They were just giving money to people who lived in the communities and they were organizing to meet their needs and maybe wasn't going that direction. But if we really could just get money and get people paid to who are in these communities to actually benefit and access all of this great work that the panelists are doing, I think would make a tremendous difference in terms of how effective the work you all are doing would be in these communities.
Yeah, just to mention one specific thing that, earlier I talked about stimulus money going into the US Department of Agriculture. In addition to the Farm Bill money that's there typically, there's also a lot of extra money. So they've really developed new programs, new grant programs. And one of them is called like a Regional Food System Partnership Program. And so we're applying for that and hope to be able to fund the participation of community, the development of some kind of community advisory council to get some of this capacity built to actually go through a process that is inclusive and authentically participatory, so we can get to the place where we then can use effectively the $30 million or whatever we can get from American Rescue Plan funds. So that's kind of a critical process piece, but goes to this issue of community participation and compensating people for that and having the capacity to do that kind of coordination work that's critical. Did want to mention, and still open for another 15 minutes, people want to stay on to answer Judd's question about what's lighting up inside as you listen to these conversations, but definitely wanted to mention next Tuesday at the same time, we're having a kind of complementary learning lab to look at that land, urban ag, food production piece, and the infrastructure that needs to be built up more to really have a locally coherent, equitable, secure food system. And then July 7th is when we'll be making the case more explicitly to Metro government leaders, to Metro Council, to mayoral candidates on funding of these initiatives. So July 7th at 2:30 will be this reckoning forum that we're called Food Justice Reckoning Forum, we're calling it. So we'll send out more information about that, but hope you all will participate. But back to other comments or questions.
Is that a live event?
It'll be online event just to make it possible for the most people to participate, including Metro folks.
And Craig will be there?
Which Craig?
Greenberg.
We're certainly going to invite him. He'll be embarrassed if he's not there.
I also want to name the beloved community group and several of the folks that are on here with that planning team are helping host this. We choose Action Constellations, different areas where we focus on. And we also want to always remember the intersection with race. Beloved Community is specifically designed to address systemic issues related to race. And I want to remind us about the racial issues that intersect all of the issues that we're talking about, specifically food justice at the moment, and continue to hold that lens on all of these issues that we're addressing, because the race lens is a significant piece of those that are suffering with food insecurity. So just on the kind of on behalf of Beloved Community, let's keep that lens in our conversation.
Are we missing any questions in the chat? I know there was some nice exchange about the refugee community, and Abby was talking about the work that the Americana is doing around that, as well as Common Earth Gardens, working with refugee and immigrant folks in some of their gardens. And we'll have folks talk about that next week in more depth.
Are there a need for more farmers, for more producers?
Most definitely. I think the more farmers you have, the better. I mean, there's a recognition that, you know, in urban production, you can only produce so much, and it's really critical that we're supporting the farmers surrounding cities and making sure that there are good linkages into various markets here in the city. So that's an important piece we'll talk about next week, and farm to institution, farm to the neighborhoods that need it the most. But yeah, would love to open that to Karyn, Mike, Rhona, just other thoughts on that question.
Well, we have plenty of food this year. Last year we struggled because of weather issues, but then, like I said, once that cleared up, we had more supply than demand. So right now for New Roots, with the amount of resources we have enough food and we could fit more people in. So it's actually the opposite problem. I need connections to people who would like to eat fresh, local, organic produce, but otherwise can't afford to purchase it at farmers markets and can't get to farmers markets, you know, so that's what I need help with. Now, if we wanted to double, let's say next season, we wanted to say we want 1,400 shares. Yes, we would need more food production, but I think our farmers we have right now would be able to move forward with us. But again, we would need the help with the demand. We would need more people pushing forward on, you know, getting the word out that it's available. So the resources have to catch up with the food, and the food has to catch up with the resources, if that makes sense.
One of the things that I worry about a lot in terms of a really decentralized food system, a small community focused food system, is access to products beyond fresh produce. I mean, as Karyn has said, the supply is pretty good right now. We are definitely seeing farmers with more produce available. Like, we get a lot of donations every week from farmers because they're not selling. So that, I feel like we have that at least now covered. But I think of things like dairy, bread, other staple products. You know, if we are in a situation like the pandemic showed us last year, if we find ourselves in a situation where we really cannot rely on big corporations to be bringing in things like, I mean, just think of anything that you go to the grocery store to buy, you know, those are the things, flour, sugar, you know, I think of the things that my grandmother would go to the grocery store to buy. You know, they raised their own cows, they raised their own chickens, they had eggs, but they didn't have flour, they didn't have sugar. You know, what else? I mean, just think of anything. We're such a global economy, and we're just so dependent on products from around the world. How can we start to support producers and makers of those kind of products within our own community?
Great points. And Mike, I don't know if you want to talk about this at all, but I mean, one of the things that we're focusing on in the proposal around the ARP funds is the need to support Black and brown farmers, Black and brown, food businesses and other value-added, producers, because, as we all know, there's been such a history of dispossession and disinvestment. So there's definitely more resources that are needed in order for them to build their capacity, right?
Just mainly piggybacking off of what both of them said. Yes, we need more producers, but you can take the access that we have right now and turn those into products, just like Rhona said. So everything that they said is pretty much what I've been speaking on in the past couple of years, because we might create more entrepreneurs. I know a lot of Black farmers that I deal with that produce raw milk, they don't have access to a pasteurizer. So yes, we need more, but we also need to create a better system and create more entrepreneurs that can turn this extra produce into products. That's a key step.
Thanks. And just wanted to raise up, I think, to that question about, do we need more farmers? Abby noted in the chat, in the international gardening community, there is no shortage of farmers, gardeners, but a huge lack of access of land, water, and markets. I don't know if you wanted to speak more to that. It's a great question. The land issue we'll talk about a lot next week as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, I was just going to speak to, I know that that's true of the community that I work with. And I think we'll talk about it more next week. So I don't want to take up too much time.
But on that point, yeah, I think if anyone has connections to, congregations, houses of worship, family members, their businesses, if there is extra land that can be farmed, we're definitely interested in inventorying that and, making sure that folks can have access to that, because long-term access to land when you're doing farming is critical if you're going to invest in building up the soil and all of those things of infrastructure. Rhona, did you want to add something here?
I just wanted to say that I think that as a society, all of us need to value the work of farmers more. I'm not addressing anybody here. I think everybody here probably agrees to that, but I'm amazed when I see what farmers are charging. Sometimes I tell them, wow, you really need to charge more for that. It's worth more. Mm-hmm. I think farmers need to value their products more, and society, and we as a community need to value it more and pay them more for what they are doing. They work really hard.
Yeah. Avram, you're breaking up. Go ahead and try again, and if not, type it into the chat if you can. Yeah, we're not catching you at all. Yeah, can you write your question in the chat and we'll read that out loud.
Is that better?
We caught 3 words. Go ahead and try. No, so sorry. You're breaking.
Okay. I'll take care.
Okay. Any thoughts, burning questions, things on?
Yeah, one thing that has come to me with this question about farmers and whether we need more farmers is it just really shines a light on the fact that this is a systems issue and not a capacity issue, that we experience scarcity. I mean, obviously, if we have plenty of farmers and they need access to land, water, and markets, then it's not that, the capacity has been diminished because of the system, but in reality, if the system wasn't disrupting certain connections, then we would have capacity to address a lot of the food insecurity that we experience. So I think that, you know, keeping that, and we're sort of keeping that in mind here because we're talking about the grassroots efforts that people need to make and whatnot. But I think also we all have to remember that we are disrupting something, and there is something to be disrupted in these efforts if there's going to be the solution to what this issue of food insecurity. It's not, the status quo isn't going to be able to be maintained out of our efforts if food insecurity is going to be addressed, especially for, you know, the people, minorities and people who are and economically disadvantaged individuals.
Thank you, Jeff. So we've got just a couple minutes left, so thought it would be great to just see if our speakers have a final word for us as we had right before adjourning. I wonder if I'd like to share a final thought. Mike, they've gotten used to you going first, so.
I just appreciate your time. Like I said, we have Opportunity Corner every Saturday from 10 to 2, 18th and Magazine. Just come on out and visit just to see exactly what we're trying to do. And once again, I do appreciate you.
Thanks, Mike.
Again, thank you for the time for everybody in our community caring so much about the issue, and feel free to reach out to me and anyone else at New Roots to help. Oh, and we are looking for new board members. I should say that. So if you know anyone, we in particular have spaces right now only for BIPOC individuals. So that's Black, Indigenous, people of color. Thank you.
Thanks, Karyn. Rhona, you get the final word.
Yeah, thank you. This has been really fun. And I'm inspired by how many people in our community care about these issues. And I think we do have a beautiful community. Sometimes we don't see that maybe because we're within it, but Louisville does have a very beautiful community around food justice and local food and all of that. So I'm happy to be a part of it. And I love the work that you're doing, Andrew, with food in neighborhoods. I think that some of the ideas that were thrown out earlier in terms of the need for this sort of umbrella organization or this spokesperson or this this organization that's bringing people together is crucial. And it seems like you're poised to fill that gap. And I love the work that Judd and in Interfaith Paths to Peace are doing in terms of just bringing people together for conversation. That's really crucial as well. So I think the two organizations, and I'm sorry that I don't know, there's other people here doing great work that I'm not mentioning, but it's exciting to see the work that everybody's doing.
Thank you, Rhona, for starting those thank yous. Yeah, special thanks to Judd Hendricks, Interfaith Paths to Peace, Beloved Community, Al and Nikki with Beloved Community have been especially helpful during the planning of this. And yeah, hope you all have a great week, and we'll see you next week, if not before. Thanks, everyone.
Everyone, thank you.